So, John, thank you for joining me on the show today. Introduce yourself to everybody.
My name is John Hill. I'm a 20-year law enforcement veteran in the state of Georgia, and I am also co-owner of a company called Shield Protection Products, which is just turned 4 years old.
Very cool. Very cool. So, I'm always curious to ask people in law enforcement, what was it in your life that happened that made you realize, hey, I want to be in law enforcement? What helps you to make that career decision?
Uh, Very defining moment for me, and a lot of people probably close to my age will have some type of similar, where this is a defining moment. But yeah, September 11th.
Mm,
I was in college. I remember I was going to take a test, and everyone was coming the opposite way from the university. And I stopped a girl that I had class with and said, what are we doing? I thought we had like this big test today. And her not knowing, I remember her response. She said somebody crashed a plane in a building somewhere, so they've canceled school. And like she didn't understand it. Nobody
right.
really knew. And
Yeah.
then you
Yeah.
got back, and like I don't think I like left my living room and the TV for like 4 days. And I actually was like, I'm going to join up with the military. Whoever will train me first and drop me off to fight, like that's where I'm going to sign up with. Uh, Brief sidetrack. I'm an only child. My mother panicked about that, but she was very smart. She didn't outwardly say no, don't do that.
Hmm.
Uh, and then also, you saw NYPD, Port Authority, FDNY. They were kind of highlighted in that aftermath of that, and the process of trying to save people and the recovery process. So that was kind of impressed upon me. And then magically, a lieutenant from the local sheriff's office showed up and knocked on my door. My mother had called unbeknownst to me because she was friends with this guy and said, "You've got to stop my son from joining the military. Take him on a couple of ride alongs. And at least if he's going to go out there and do dangerous things, I want him close to me." So, yeah, he just kind of showed up, introduced himself, and said, "Let's ride in the car for a little bit." And I did that a few times, and some interesting things happened. And
Hmm.
like the third time, he just showed up with the application and said, "We'll just fill this out and let's see what happens." And so there I went.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's funny. I have a similar story on 9/11. I was also in college and I kind of knew what was going on. And I went to a class where I also had a test. And the professor started out by saying, hey, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world right now, but we're still going to have this test. And so he still made us do the test. I think, the towers were still standing at that point and all that kind of craziness. So yeah, I've never forgiven him for that. So yeah, that's one of the things that I have from him. So yeah. Um, so in your line of work, you see violence in a lot of different forms. What are some ways that we as like an average person can avoid violence?
Here's my recommendation. I think this is overlooked a lot. People will take self defense classes. They'll carry some type of tool for self defense. They get security systems. I think one of the biggest things that's been critical in my career that people don't think about is study people.
Hmm.
So, um, you know, everywhere I go, and it's second nature. It's not even a thing I think about, but you get a baseline of the environment. What are people doing? What are most people doing? Or even talking to someone. Okay, how is this guy now? As someone starts to get amped up, or someone starts to, get emotional about something, to recognize those indicators and those physiological changes in their body. I think just being aware of that and being able to read a room and read people is like a skill that is just usually not even talked about, and it's one of the most important skills because I don't want to use a self-defense tool. I don't want
Right.
to have to use whatever
Yeah.
self-defense training I have. I just want to know that things are starting to go bad and just leave.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I hate the people where there's some video that pops up online and somebody's like, well, I just would have shot him. And like, no, that's not what you want. That's not what you want to do. I like what you're saying. So in your experience, is there like a telltale sign that you've learned that said, okay, somebody's about to pop off here? Is there something that a little tip that you can share with us that would say this situation's about to change?
So this is Unfortunately, the answer is no, because there's no one action that if taken by itself means anything. So you kind of look for clusters of actions
Yes.
together.
Yes.
So you can say, someone clenching their teeth. Well, if that's all you have and everything else about their demeanor is they're calm, and then you go, well, that's maybe just this outlier. So what I would say, and the best way I can give it is an example, I do this with my kids. Is like we were in Walmart about 2 weeks ago. We're in the parking lot of Walmart, right? And typically at a store, people are doing one of two things. Like they're going to and fro. They have, a cart, or they have bags, or they're walking in, but they're going somewhere, or they're kind of have this lost look, and they're like honking the alarm on their car because they forgot what row they parked on.
Right.
And there was a guy that was just standing kind of in the middle of the parking lot in between rows of cars. He was not looking for a car. He was not going anywhere. He was just looking around. And my daughter, who was with me, is about 10. So, not in a way that, in an age appropriate way. It's not because I don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
scare her, and she's very good at this. It's almost become a game. And I said, okay, here's what I need you to do. Look out and tell me if you see anyone that's not acting like everyone else. And she looked for about 30 seconds. She said, there's a guy. I said, what is he doing? She said, nothing. He's just standing there. Is that normal for a grocery store parking lot? No. And I said, okay, we're not saying he's a bad guy. We're
Right.
not saying that at all. But we're going to notice that, and we're going to be aware of that. So I think you just doing that with yourself. I mean, there's some great training you can take, some books you can read, but if you just do that with yourself, most people have the ability to pick up on that. It's just a skill you have to train like any other skill.
Right. Right. Yeah, man, I tell you what, Walmart parking lot is a great training ground to understand human behavior. I have seen some crazy stuff out there. As a matter of fact, I was at Walmart just before I came here, and I had to make a return. And I turned the corner to go to the little return section, and there was a guy standing there with his stance was defiant. He looked angry. He was not facing the cashier that he was supposed to be talking to. He was facing everybody else and checking his six. And I thought to myself, I'm going to give this dude all the room he wants. Honestly, I actually had the thought I should probably leave, because usually tensions escalate at the Walmart return counter anyway. So I was thinking, man, I should, but I kind of want to see what happens. I'm not with my family. So I stuck it out, and everything ended up being okay. But yeah, I just turned the corner, and it was this immediate, that dude is going to hurt somebody if things go south. So yeah. So take your kids to Walmart and ask them, find the person that's not acting like everybody else. I like that. Or has Walmart completely flipped upside down and everybody is acting weird, and you have to take who was acting normal at Walmart, and maybe that's the person that stands out.
Yeah.
We had to go to Walmart and to Target one day as a family, and my son was very small at the time, and I walked around with him, and I was like, so kind of, how does Walmart feel compared to how Target feels? Just like, how do you feel while you're here? And he's like, everybody's more relaxed. I was like, yeah, man, everybody's more relaxed here. That's different, but you're also in a store. So, just trying to help build those memories, but that's awesome. I try to do that kind of stuff with my son as well. So I'm glad to hear another dad is playing those games with his kids.
Yeah.
Cool. So if you're ever in a situation where you have either missed the signs that somebody's putting out, that signal that they're emitting, they want to have trouble with you, you've tried to, get away, but you can't. How important is de-escalation when things are starting to heat up?
De-escalation is super important. And I also think the term de-escalation is misunderstood, and it's confused about what it is. And I will tell you this, when they really first started rolling out de-escalation training in law enforcement, because that's mandatory for us. Like, the honest answer is, I mean, I guess I'm kind of like, the older, more experienced kind of salty guy, which kind of seemed to have happened overnight. But a lot of us did not like it. We fought it, and we said, man, look, you put me in a dangerous situation. I'm not trying to offer hugs and lollipops. Like, I'm going to do what I got to do. And so we kind of thought that's what it was, like you want me to come out and, come in with a box of Kleenexes and the dude has a knife. And, it was explained to me. I took a de-escalation class and the instructor came in and put it a different way. And it really clicked. And it was this in de-escalation. De-escalation requires both parties. Both parties have to be a part of the de-escalation. If one's trying to, you know, to say words to calm one down, to calm the situation down, and the other person's not doing it, that's not de-escalation.
Mm.
It requires action on both parties. And so de-escalation, the way most people think about it, is super important, right? Not saying words are going to excite things, trying to ask these kind of open-ended, empathetic questions and figure out what's going on with someone. But he put it, and I carry this mindset that, hey, in that situation, de-escalation, maybe he charges you with the knife and you put 2 rounds in his chest. That is de-escalation in that instance,
Right.
because now both parties have de-escalated. So I think de-escalation is super important, but I think some people tend to. I know we thought of it as a trade-off, right? Like,
Mm.
we're doing this instead of being ready with force, and just the way that instructor explained it, that it's both, right? Like, I am going to try to calm things down. I'm going to try to figure out what's going on. I'm going to be empathetic. I'm going to ask questions and try to resolve. But man, it's not visible, but I am ready to resort to force in an instant. Now, I'm not
Hmm.
showing that. I'm not escalating. I'm not building myself up. It's kind of a calm within me, but it needs to be able to flip like that. And then that still is de-escalation. Just the way he explained it, and I probably don't do it justice, but I never heard it explained that way. Hey, you have to tase the guy and he falls down and now he's cuffed up. That was your de-escalation.
Hmm.
So I think when you think of de-escalation as this continuum that can span all the way from, hey bud, what's going on? I can tell you're having some issues. What can I do to help you? Tell me what's going on. Let me help. All the way from, sometimes, high degrees of use of force. That really helped me out in understanding and utilizing de-escalation and buying into it. And overwhelmingly, it doesn't go to force. You can
Hmm.
talk people down. So yeah, de-escalation has been a huge tool. I have talked myself out of many, many use of force encounters, and the older you get, the more you appreciate that,
Right.
because you're like, man, you never know what's going to happen in a use of force encounter.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. And nobody really wants to get into a fight. Nobody wants to have to do that sort of stuff because it's still going to be a huge inconvenience for you. But what I heard you saying was maybe in the beginning you thought that de-escalation was not going to work for you because you were conceding something, like you weren't coming into the situation as the authority being in law enforcement, but maybe that it was, oh, if I offer this olive branch, it's like a sign of weakness. But I'm glad I hear you saying that no, it's actually a sign of strength because you don't want to engage with this person at a physical level. You don't want to do that. And in a way, you're kind of outsmarting them to kind of take that situation to make sure that it doesn't go violent, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And here's the other thing I found: it's very, very rare that I have encountered someone that I would almost just walk away and say, "Man, that guy's just evil," or "He is just
Mm.
a bad person." It's usually you're just dealing with people and the problems that come with people, and there are good sides to them, or there are good parts to them, and there are bad parts to them, but they're not inherently bad. They're just in a situation, whether it be drug abuse or they're emotionally distraught, and so you can usually connect with them on some level because
Hmm.
as you get into this, you realize it's not so clear cut as like good versus evil, because people are this myriad of things, and people have good in them.
Yeah,
Even people that do bad have some good aspects to them. So yeah, it's I think it's connecting with that part and kind of the commonality on like a human level and saying, man, what can I do to help you? And most people react to that. And then I think also when you're throwing that out there and you see something building within them, that almost becomes kind of like reading someone. You go, man, I am not approaching this guy in a way where I'm aggressive, and I see him. He's just building up. It puts you. It's kind of that early alert system to go. I either need to get out of here, or I
sure.
need to be prepared for what's going to happen because this guy is not responding. He is on his own program.
Gotcha. Yeah, he's already gone to like code black or something like that. There's no talking that down. And you make a really good point that, evil people seem to be very rare. And because I know a lot of time in traffic when somebody makes, a mistake or they don't turn where they're supposed to, that sort of thing, I just automatically assume that that person is the stupidest person to ever walk the face of the earth and that sort of thing. But that's not the case. It's just somebody messed up. And so you need to understand that there you don't need to rush to an absolute judgment of somebody, that there is more to it.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very cool. Is there a story that you can kind of share with us that could help illustrate, a good way for us to be able to protect ourselves when we're out in public? Is there like a situation where you learned something, or maybe there was a civilian that had a situation that you were able to work with, or maybe even another situation of you teaching your kids? Is there something that a story you can share with us?
Sure. I will tell you this. I think it kind of goes back to reading people and really almost kind of de-escalation. But I had when I first started out, like I first just got assigned my first beat, right? Because for that you're a relief driver and you just fill in wherever because you're the new guy. And they gave me a beat, and it wasn't the best part of town. And so I kind of set out to get to know my beat, right? I wanted to
Mhm.
know the neighborhoods. I wanted to know who was in the neighborhoods. And I got to know where my problem areas were, and I got to know my people, like the guy that's retired and he's in his yard all day and he knows everything that goes on that street. But I had an incident. It was a fight in progress, and um, I get there and being young and dumb, like I should have waited for the second car to like be closer, but I just went in, right? Because I was like, man, fight in progress, like here I go. I'm gonna just go in and like save the day and arrest whoever needs to be arrested. And it was like 30 people. And I got out and was like instantly was like, nobody here is my friend. Like this is
Mhm.
like it was like two groups, and then it kind of became like those groups kind of united, and it was like 30 people and the cop, and you're like, crap.
Yeah.
Um, and this guy, his street name was Hot Rod, and I'm sure there's 100,000
Oh
Hot
yeah.
Rods
Oh
in the
yeah.
country. But
Yeah.
that was what everyone called him, was Hot Rod, and Hot Rod was the older guy. Um, Hot Rod was still living the street life, and he was still, engaged in legal activity. But I had gotten to know Hot Rod, um, and I knew his story. I knew kind of how he came up. I knew how he got into the drug game, and it kind of falls in that he did some bad things, but Hot Rod had kids. He was very
Mhm.
good to his kids. I mean, there was good parts to Hot Rod. And right about the time that I'm like going back to the fight, right about the time I'm like, oh crap, this is not going to go well for me. Hot Rod happened to be there, and Hot Rod said one word, and everyone was done, and I didn't have to engage anybody. And he came up and talked to me later and said, because you have always been, um, you've treated me respectfully. Now, don't get me wrong, I arrested so many people out of Hot Rod's house. I would like park my car like a quarter mile away and like be behind a tree. And at one point, Hot Rod had told me that I was his worst nightmare. But I never treated him wrong. Like we understood where things
Right.
were, but we could still connect on a human level. And it just taught to me kind of the value of relationships. Don't uh, write people off, and understand like your environment, right? Because
Yeah.
I was so focused on I'm going to accomplish this goal. It didn't even dawn on me that when you get out of the car, there's 30 people and you,
Yeah,
right? So that was not like a good situation for me to be in. Um, and then I also just think it just taught me the value of it. Kind of goes back to studying people, right? Because I had built a rapport with Hot Rod, and that goes back to de-escalation. That's part of de-escalation is rapport building, right? Now it kind
hmm,
of worked out different because it was kind of this third party, like Hot Rod de-escalated on my behalf. But in law enforcement, it taught me the value of building a rapport with people, um, and it also taught me the value of sit back and think for a minute before you just jump into something.
sure.
So those were two lessons that I've carried with me my entire career.
Yeah, that's awesome. By the way, my street name is also Hot Rod. So yeah, it's a very very common name. Yeah. You've talked about this just a little bit with what you're teaching your kids, but what do parents need to be teaching our children so that they prioritize their safety?
Here's the thing with that. I think um, at an age appropriate level, right? Like you're going to talk to a 15, 16-year old differently. They're going to talk to a 17. I mean, it's do a 7 or 8 year old.
Hmm.
But I think it's this. I think that shielding kids from everything um, and is just does them an injustice because you see people and it's like I call it the sheep mentality, and I have
Yeah.
friends like this. I'm like, you're just playing the numbers game that chances are it's not going to be you,
Yeah.
and chances are
Yeah.
it won't, but it's going to be somebody, and if it ever is you, you are so woefully unprepared you'll have no response. if
Right.
if 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 you're ever the unlucky person, you'll have no idea what to do. So I think it starts with like with I call them my two littles. I have four kids, but the two littles are in elementary school, so we kind of play these games. uh like we pulled up the other day. I had told them one time we saw a Bible on the rear deck of a car, right?
Hmm.
And I look, we go to church. I don't have an issue with the Bible, but I had told them, I said, look, kids, you carry a Bible, close to you, and in your car for you. When you put it on the back deck of your car, that's you want the world to know. And I said, really, you want the police officer that's approaching the rear
Yep.
of the car to see that and put that in his head. And so I said, Daddy always paid attention to that. And I used to ask him, "What's your favorite Bible verse?" And don't say John 3:16. And it was like a big indicator. But
All right.
uh, like a couple of times they like we pulled up the other day at this gas station, and there was a Bible in the rear deck of the car, and I had the windows down, and this guy was, and they're like, "There's a Bible," and I'm like, "Okay, shh, okay." But
Look at that man. Yeah.
yeah, so starting there now with my son, I've got a son who's a freshman in high school, and so I've told him, son, like it's time to start learning how to handle yourself, and then and my daughter as well, because I've got a daughter that's a sophomore, and so it's like, hey, yeah, you're gonna know how to do this. So I have a pole barn, and I take them out there, and it's not like we're out there every day. It's, hey, you're not doing anything. Let's take 15 minutes. We're gonna go out there, and I'm gonna show you how to throw a punch without breaking your wrist. We're gonna do some very basic things. Most fights end up on the ground, and just talking about it. And by doing that, like I say, at an age appropriate level, even if you're not out training, but just talking about it, what it does, and even visualizing, right? There's a lot of power in visualizing. People that play scenarios in their head, when the situation arises, your brain goes through files, I mean, faster than any computer, and it's looking for something that looks similar to this to tell you what to do.
Yep.
And when people just freeze and stand there and you go, run, do something, and they don't, it's because that computer, known as the brain, has gone through every file it can and says, we have nothing to tell us what to do. So I think talking about this, going through scenarios, if this happens, this is something you could do. Um, that's up to you. With me, like my two older kids are getting to an age, like my daughter, watches the smaller kids if we're gone. Like I'm starting to take them out and teach them firearm safety, and they have, when we even start shooting a gun, it's, you know, go through 10 times in a row and show me that the gun is safe and how you know the gun is safe. It's the first thing. Like I absolutely have to know that you know how to make a
Yep.
gun safe, and we're not moving on from that. But that to me, that's age appropriate for them. I wouldn't
Hmm.
do that with my littles, right? I'm not going to
Oh
have them
yeah.
out there training.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I think that's what it is. And I'll also say this to anybody listening. It I think a lot of parents like, I don't want to scare my kids. I don't want to put this in them. I will tell
Sure.
you this. I'm not a UFC fighter and someone that, trains, uh, it'd probably be a bad day for me. But I do know this. I think it's more freeing to know that you have knowledge, to know how to avoid a situation, to know how to see it's coming. And if you can't, to know that you've got some knowledge and some skill sets to handle the situation, it's actually more freeing and more
Hmm.
empowering than someone that just walks around rolling the dice going, I hope it's not me today.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's key. Um, and you could do it in a fun way. I mean, that's a bonding thing with me and my son. We're out there
Hmm.
being guys, and I'm like, this is part of being a man. You just got to know how to handle yourself a little bit.
Absolutely. John, that was the entire podcast right there, man. There's that one answer right there. That was awesome. That was awesome. So when looking at your kids and you talking about age appropriate lessons to learn, just give me like a handful of lessons that you think is appropriate for little kids, and then maybe something that's a little bit more for the older kids, just so people kind of have an idea of where to judge where their kids are. Obviously, every child is different. It's going to be different in how you communicate to them, but maybe like two or three lessons for some little kids and two or three lessons for some older kids.
So with the little kids, I think I've kind of talked ad nauseum about starting to teach them what different behavior looks like. Another thing that we do is like, I think one of the worst things is the whole stranger danger thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
that it's just the guy that you don't know that looks weird. So, you know, starting to teach them, we almost do it as like a game. So if, your coach says, hey, can you go pick up that ball for me? Is that something you can do? Yes. Hey, if your coach says, I need you to come after school and, you know, come sit in my car. I need to talk to you. Is that something you should do?
Right.
Like, no. And then, you make it like hey, here's a Skittle or, whatever. So it's starting to build it, and that kind of sticks with them, but it does it in a way that, I want to make sure that when I'm not making them overly paranoid, overly scared. So that's how we kind of do it, almost as kind of like a game
Hmm.
mentality.
Absolutely.
To start to build those, and then as they get older, like with my oldest daughter, we can start to talk about some things. She's starting to date, and so we'll get into specific
Sure.
situations, and
Sure.
she has that foundation to build on and say, Addison, if you're in this situation, going out on a date, and the young guy that you're with does X, Y, and Z. I mean, what are you going to do? What do you think is appropriate to do? And then you really start having real kind of scenario based conversations, or just giving them these things to think about. And it's as important as teaching them to balance a checkbook or anything else. It's just a life skill that they need.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely it's a life skill that they need. Before we move on from your law enforcement stuff, I do want to ask this. Is there like a really positive story that you can tell us or share with us about your time that, maybe you got to help somebody or you saw somebody turn their life around? What's just like a really good positive policing story?
Uh, I'll tell you this, and this was just one of my favorite things. So one thing that I love to do, when I first started off as that beat cop, and like I say, I wasn't in the best part of town, is you would see like kids, elementary school age kids, especially in the summertime, they would just be out, and I would carry like a bag of like Jolly Ranchers, and you could see some of them got older because of experiences that family or their parents unfortunately may have had with police, where they were
Sure.
arrested, or I mean, honestly, maybe we'd gone and done a search warrant on their home, and those are the type of things that happened. But you could see with the little kids, come up, you're police," and they hadn't made up their mind yet. They
Hmm.
kind of had heard some
Hmm.
things, but they were just more curious. And so, what I love doing is rather than being closed off, I mean, I would, I'd put the car in park, I'd put it in the driver's seat. If they wanted to hit the horn and the sirens, I mean, the neighbors probably didn't
Right.
appreciate it,
Right.
but I'd let them put my campaign hat on. We would, I'd show them gear in the car, anything they wanted to see. I'd hand out Jolly Ranchers. I'd introduce myself by my first name. I
Hmm.
have kids
Hmm.
about your age. So, you could just see the change in this kid's like 7 years old, and all of a sudden he thinks you're like the coolest thing, and you do become the good guy. And you tell him, hey, police are here to help you. We don't just arrest people. And that was the most heartwarming thing to me, because I almost got to be like the ice cream man. I mean,
Hmm.
when they saw me, they knew if they saw that unit number, they knew that guy had candy. And you get out and play basketball with them, or I even had some of the older kids on my beat a couple of times. They'd have a flat tire or something, and there was no one that had shown them. So I would tell them, hey, bud, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm not going to change a tire for you because you're 17 years old, but I'm going to sit here with you and show you how to change a tire, so you'll know how to change a tire for the rest of your life. And even then, you would see them kind of melt a little bit. So that, I don't know that there's one incident, but what I liked is kind of coming out from behind the badge and being like, man, like I'm just John,
Hmm.
like this is what I do, but I'm relatable just like you. So I always tried to do that in the area that I police. And I will tell you this, people would call me when something happened on my beat. Uh, Either the investigator would call me because he knew, or I would call the investigator because people remembered that stuff. And when they would never talk to the police, they would talk to John. They would talk to Hill, right? Because they kind of knew me on a personal level, and I was able to give so much information and tips and solve shootings because they really saw me as part of their community. I mean, not everybody, because you had some that were just out there completely doing wrong,
Sure.
and
Right.
those are the
Right.
guys I tried to arrest. But it was really, I really enjoyed that.
Very cool. That is cool. That's awesome, man. So, in addition to being in law enforcement, you have a partner and you guys started Shield Protection Products. Tell me a little bit about that.
So, Shield Protection Products was started in 2020, and it was basically started kind of on this precept, or this thought. Um, when you start thinking about tools for self defense, if someone decides that a firearm is something that's right for them, there is no lack of good education and good training to be
Sure.
found.
Yep.
There are a lot of organizations that put out good instructors, and man, you can just find a good firearms instructor. When you go to the non-lethal and other self-defense tools, there are like a very, very small hand few of companies that put out any training, that put out good product, and there is an overwhelming amount of just janky products and people. What we found out, that they probably know how to run a website better than us because we're not businessmen by trade. But you would call and talk to them, and you go, these guys know nothing about what they're selling. They just know how
Right.
to run like an internet or an e-commerce
Hmm.
site.
Hmm.
Um, and so we really felt there was a need there. Like, we know what products we would push. We know what products we would never sell, and we see them being sold all the time, and we think we can empower people with some knowledge. So we tried to marry the law enforcement knowledge with good product we felt about, and it ended up that led to us doing our own brand of pepper spray. Um, and then we decided, so there's a QR code on there where we kind of impart some knowledge, because we realized people are kind of sold. They think when they buy from a company that they're the experts, and people have this false sense of hope that I bought pepper spray, it's in my pocket, it's in my purse, I bought a taser, it's in my car, that they're safe. And it's like, if you don't ever give it a thought until you need it, you're not going to rise to the occasion. You will
Right.
sink to the level of your training, and your level of training is zero. Um, and we just saw that as a big problem, and that was the impetus for starting the company, is try to address that, because we felt there was a need.
Very cool. So you said you started your own like brand of pepper spray. What makes yours different? What makes it unique?
So here's what makes it unique. It's everything behind our pepper spray has a reason or comes from our experience. So I don't, we didn't go in a chemist lab and invent a new solution. But, when making it, kind of the response we got from the lab that actually makes it for us is they're like, you just want us to just make kind of what everyone else does. And we're like, no, we have input. We want this. We want this many, Scoville heat units. We want this, for example, we have a flip top on
Mm-hmm.
most of our cans because that's more of a gross motor skill, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's more kind of a caveman move, and you lose fine motor skills in a
Oh
high
yeah.
stress situation. So
Mm-hmm.
everything down to choosing the colors, and honestly, the lab that mixed it was kind of like, oh, okay. Most people just say, make me pepper spray because I want to sell it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think the fact that we had a hand in the pepper spray, and then also, like I say, we made it very easy. When we had labels printed, we just put a QR code on there and say, we're going to do a 10-minute informational video just to try to put some concepts and thoughts in people's head, encourage them to seek more training. But if nothing else, at least we'll make them aware of some of the things we've talked about, situational awareness, reactionary gap, avoid tunnel vision, seek to get out of the situation as soon as you can. It's not a thing of like if you're walking around really with any self-defense tool and you think that empowers you, that now you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof just because you have any self-defense tool, like you are carrying with the wrong mindset. That
Mm-hmm.
any self-defense tool is a tool of last resort, right?
Yeah.
And so we kind of preach these things. So yeah, we feel good about it, and we if we can help people, and we've got some feedback from people that we've been able to help, and so we feel good about it.
Very good, man. Very good. So yeah, I like the fact that you're not only doing, creating a pepper spray out of your own experience, you're also teaching people how to use it. Cause yeah, a lot of folks aren't doing that. So where can people find out more about your business?
So they can go to shieldprotectionproducts.com. That's our website. We're also under the same name on Facebook and Instagram, Shield Protection Products. You'll know us. You'll see a lion head, and then you'll see it's a lion head with a little Bible verse embedded in there. So that's how you'll know that it's us.
Very cool. And I think you guys have offered a discount code for our listeners, right? Isn't it Secure Dad 10?
Yes, it is. Go on. That's good for the shieldprotectionproducts.com. Be used one time, no matter what the purchase. And yeah, that's kind of a thank you for having us on, and thank you to your listeners.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Yeah, my folks really enjoy being able to learn about products like this, but also to be able to get a discount because I know about you and me, man. Like every dollar counts right now. So that's awesome. So John, man, I appreciate talking to you today. I've had a lot of fun. I appreciate the stories that you've shared, talking about how to read people and how important that skill is. Man, God bless you and what you're doing in the future, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for having us on.